Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
All right. Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. Sam Bushman live on your radio. This is the broadcast for April the 28th in the year of our Lord, 2025. This is Hour 2 of 2. The goal always to protect life, liberty, and property, to promote God, family, and country, to reject revolution unless it's Jesus' revolution, and to promote the supreme law of the land, the Constitution for the United States of America. That's right, promoting God, family, and country. That's who we are and what we do. Lowell Nelson, campaignforliberty.org, is with me, and he's got 6 incredible topics we'll get to in just a second. But Dr. Scott Bradley and I were talking last hour about this, and I'm bringing this up because Lowell Nelson happens to be an expert. He grew up on a farm. And he eats very, very healthy right now. And so here's the quick summation and then your response, Lowell. Sure. Ultra-processed foods tied to 124,000 premature deaths over the last 2 years, a new report comes out and says, documented at upinews.com or upi.com. They also are talking about Nicole Shanahan. That's RFK-JR's former VP pick. She's going to be doing a talk show on Blaze TV called Back to the People. Back to the People wants to reject the mainstream press and wants to have in-depth interviews and detailed discussions about how to make America healthy again. We also documented how junk food took hold in the United States. There's a big Epoch Times article written about that over the weekend. It's not food, it's food-like substances, says RFK Jr. Junk food origins. Turns out the big tobacco companies are the ones that basically created these foods that have no nutrition but are addictive. Beginning in the 1960s, R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris basically started buying into the food world, and they've basically taken it over to a great degree. And tobacco executives transfer their knowledge of marketing of cigarettes and tobacco and addictive products to food. And these processed foods have now turned into an addiction. It's a growing problem, they say. Nearly 70% of Americans are now overweight or obese. 60% of Europeans and growing are in the same situation. And the bottom line is, hey, these cigarette companies are evil. And they've literally basically turned our food against us. Genetically modified foods, chemicals, right on through. And my point is the Founding Fathers realized how important it was to be close to the land. And Founding Fathers understood how dangerous big, huge business was. Because they lobby, they have their own agenda, they're into filthy lucre. They don't care about really the free enterprise system or that kind of stuff. They just want naked capitalism. And so I say that the answer, though, is within each American's hands, each family's hands. You know what? You can work on victory gardens. Even if you live in an apartment, you can grow things in your windowsill or out on a balcony. And it's amazing with modern technology what you can actually grow and do. But you can also participate in like a food co-op, or you can raise chickens, or you can buy chicken, eggs or chickens from your neighbors. You can, go in on a cow. There's a ton of things that we, the people, can do. And it's time we get back to the land, and time we take charge of our own food. It's like government school. I can't get rid of the education department. Looks like neither can the Republicans. Nevertheless, the fact is I could not put my kids in government school. I've never put a kid in the government school at all. I've got 8 kids. They're all grown. They're all basically graduated from high school now. A couple of days, and my youngest one will actually have her graduation. But school's virtually over for this year for her. So I've got all my 8 kids graduated. I've never put a single kid in the government school. Okay, you can do the same thing when it comes to your food, when it comes to your local community. And that's the solutions that I recommend. Stay close to the land and get big pharma, get big corporations, get these tobacco companies out of your food. And you know what? You can eat nutritiously. Our dear friend Caleb Warnock and others are experts at heirloom seeds. And, it all starts with an education and then basically being willing to go to work. But we, the people, can barter. We can do this in our communities. We don't need to get our food from big, tobacco company that wants to make us addicted. We can get our food from private people that we trust, or that we do ourselves, or a combination thereof. And it all starts with you, Lowell. And when I say you, I mean me, all of us in America, sir.
Well, I agree 100% with everything you just said there, Sam. I could talk the whole hour about healthful food, about farming, about ranching, about the need to divorce ourselves from big food, big medicine, big pharma. I mean, Just for example, I mean, Big Pharma, they want you sick, not sick enough so that you die, but sick enough so that you will continue to depend on them for the drugs that they sell to you. It's a big market for them, but if you die, then they lose, they lose a buyer of their goods and services, right? So they want you sick, but they don't want you dead, although there are some in the world that do want you dead. But big food benefits and big medicine, they benefit.
Well, the real deal is we want you to be sick for a long time and then dead, okay?
Yeah, exactly. And so the real solution was provided by God when he put man on earth and said, by the sweat of thy brow shalt thou eat thy bread all the days of thy life. He wasn't saying go down to the supermarket and buy food. He was saying, cultivate the land to grow food. In fact, we had Spencer W. Kimball talked about this maybe 50 years ago. When he encouraged us to have gardens and to have orchards and to grow our own food and partake of our own, food out of our own gardens and orchards. That's just a healthful way to live. Most food in the supermarkets. If it's a fruit, it's been picked green, immature. It's been ripened by chemicals in huge storage areas and then put on the shelf for you to buy. And it doesn't contain the essential elements and nutrients that you get when you pick an apple, a mature apple or peach or apricot off of your own tree that's been ripened in the sun and is ready to eat. It just doesn't have the same life-giving elements and healing elements. So if you want to have good health, and if you want to live less expensively, then we will grow your own food, whether that's orchard trees or garden. That's where our efforts really need to be. I mean, there's such a big difference, Sam. You can taste the difference between a tomato that you grow in your own garden and a tomato that you buy from the grocery store.
Oh, big time.
The latter is like eating a piece of cardboard, and the former is eating something that's delicious and nutritious, delicious to the taste and nutritious to the body. We just avoid a boatload of problems if we'll eat from what I call God's garden, which is the earth. I mean, he provided this earth for us upon which to live, and if we'll grow gardens and have orchards, cultivate orchards, we'll have more than enough food, and it'll be good, healthful food that will, bless us with good health, long lives here on the land that God gave
you mean
to us.
plenty and room to spare? Is that what you're talking about, Lowell?
Ample, yes, absolutely, ample.
And one of the other things that people need to understand, too, is oftentimes you can't do this all yourself. Okay? And it's not meant to be done all yourself. It's meant to be done in a community, to work with your neighbors and trade with your neighbors. And you know what? I've got eggs, but Lowell has chickens, and Steve has milk, and Larry, he's the best wheat farmer I know, and somebody else has potatoes, and it's not meant for us to do everything ourselves per se, but it is meant for us to barter, to locally trade with one another, to farm to table is a real thing, folks. And anyway, there's a lot of hope, and that's why I kind of continue this, because Lowell's an expert at it. All right, moving right along. Real ID is a disaster. It's been a disaster for over 20 years. Me, Ron Paul, Lowell Nelson, many others have been warning against it for 20 years, but now Donald Trump has backed it hook, line, and sinker, it looks like. Lowell, shame on the Donald.
Yeah, for sure. Right? His secretary, Kristi Noem, says we're going to start enforcing the Real ID Act come May 7th, and that's just like a week or two away. We need to realize, folks, this Real ID Act is an effort to basically pass a national ID card. If you've got a Real ID document, such as a passport or a driver's license with a gold star on it, then you will be in a national ID database. And so the Real ID Act, it was passed like in 2005. It allows Homeland Security to mandate, as it sees fit, the inclusion of additional items in a government database, including biometric identifiers such as retina scans, fingerprints, and DNA. Right? And so basically this law says that if you don't have real ID, then you're not going to be able to fly on an airplane or enter certain government buildings. Well, in order to get a real ID card, you've got to have a social security number. You've got to have proof of legal residence and proof of home address. Well, this is going to, right away, this is going to hurt anyone who does not have a social security number. And I know several such people, excellent people, by the way. And I know people.
All right, hang tight, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to Liberty Roundtable Live. Lowell Nelson back in seconds on your radio.
Are you ready to stand up for your community and support your local sheriff? Join the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association and become a vital member of the Sheriff's Citizens Posse. At cspoa.org, we empower citizens like you through weekly webinars, arming you with the knowledge to back your constitutional county sheriff. Together, we can uphold our Constitution and ensure liberty and justice for all. Your community needs you now more than ever.
This is a battle between truth and deceit. A battle between forces that would enslave this country in darkness and between a media that wants to present you with the truth. We are being censored. America's news outlets no longer provide the truth. 90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in fact.
TheEpochTimes.com.
Attention collectors and savvy investors. We are excited to announce a momentous evolution in our journey. Introducing Freewater Coin Company, formerly known as Rust Coin and Gift. This rebranding takes us back to the very roots of where it all began, Freewater, Oregon. It's a tribute to the legacy of Al Rust and a celebration of 3 generations of dedication to excellence in the world of coins and precious gifts. Al, Brian, and Jake Rust standing strong through 64 years of service. Discover a world of exceptional service at Freewater Coin Company, your premier destination for genuine, honest money and precious gifts. Under Brian's expert guidance, Freewater Coin Company, building on the legacy of Rust Coin and Gift, continues its tradition of trust and excellence. Visit us at our Provo, Utah location. Explore our treasures online at freewatercoinco.com or call us at 801-377-1574. Freewater Coin Company, where your future is built one honest coin at a time.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lowell Nelson. I'm a guest here on Sam Bushman's great show, Liberty Roundtable. Riding shotgun here this morning. We were talking about the Real ID Act and the fact that you need to have proof of home address, you need a social security number and so forth to get a real ID, even if you wanted one. Well, I know people who don't have social security numbers. I know people who don't have home address. This is going to affect them. Now, these people, by the way, would not even want real ID, even if they could get one. But it's going to hurt them, right? And anybody that doesn't have social security numbers, doesn't have a home address, it's going to hurt them. But even worse than that, for those people who have a real ID, that information that's collected by the government could easily be lost to hackers, right? I mean, the government has a terrible track record of protecting data of U.S. citizens. By the way, we have a couple of Slack channels at work. Sam, you'll be interested in this. One is called Security Awareness. The other is called Security News. And every week they're posted there on our Slack channel at work news stories about data breaches, stolen PII. They call it personally identifiable information. That's what PII stands for. So stolen PII, deep fakes, MFA attacks, which is multi-factor authentication attacks, network infections, cyber spy, ransomware. I mean, the list could go on and on. In fact, it does go on and on these 2 Slack channels at work. So in other words, once the government has your information, folks, no telling who's going to get it from them. Not to mention the devious things the government itself could do to you with that information. So submitting PII to the government is simply not a good idea. It makes you more vulnerable, not less vulnerable, right? To hackers, to cheaters, to scammers, all of the evil, people in our society that can do you damage. Once you give your information to the government, it's going to find its way into the hands of those scammers and the bad guys. Well, back to the column. Ron Paul writes this, quote, Real ID supporters deny the law turns state driver's licenses into national ID cards because states have no mandate to implement Real ID. However, citizens of any state that refuses to adopt Real ID will be unable to use their state-issued IDs for boarding an airplane or riding a train, end of quote. So this is really rich, right? The feds they claim that they're not requiring states to implement Real ID. But if you live in a state that does not implement a Real ID, then you are not going to be able to board airplanes or enter government buildings without it. So,
or you can't even get on a train. Lowell?
Yeah, Amtrak, it goes all across the country, but boy, if you don't have Real ID, I don't know if Amtrak's enforcing this, and they never checked my driver's license the last time I got on the train, which was just last year, but that's coming. That's coming down the road. And once the initial uses of Real ID, just these two things, right? Certain federal buildings and airplanes, once that becomes ingrained into society, then the government is going to take the next step. They're going to require Real ID for other activities, such as public transportation, the purchase of firearms, and maybe even medical care. Yep, even medical care.
Well, and they've put the COVID vaccine documentation as part of the discussion too. That'll be the way to back into healthcare, or they'll say people are mentally unstable, and due to red flag laws and everything else, we got to back into it. That way, they're gunning for it. What I find interesting is a lot of people say to me, Sam, don't worry, I won't use my Real ID card. I'll just use my passport. And my response is, a passport's already a federal ID. You do that, and now the states are taken out of the equation. So what you've got is really a steamroller effect. The federal government's trying to steamroll the states and force everybody into Real ID. We've been fighting it for 20-plus years. Now the administration, though, seems to be backing it whole hog.
But it's, fortunately, we do have a hero in Congress who's pushing back on Real ID, and that's, of course, Thomas Massie of Kentucky.
And sadly, Trump wants to get rid of Massie now.
Yeah. Well, Trump's got another thing coming. If he thinks he can get rid of Thomas Massie, he's got tremendous support from all over the country.
Well, for good reason.
And what he's saying is this. He says, quote, as long as the pilot's door is locked and no one has weapons, why do you care that someone who flies has government permission? End of quote. I mean, that's true. I mean, it's just crazy. So Ron Paul concludes his column this way. He says, like most 9/11 security bills, Real ID does nothing to protect the American people's safety. It does, though, do much to endanger their liberty. Real ID could even be the final piece of the transformation of America into a total surveillance society where the government monitors and thus controls our actions. Americans who understand the danger must work to get the Trump administration to reverse its position. So we talked about this last week, folks, and the solution is the same. We need to call Congress. So that's today's homework assignment. Call Congress, be firm but be polite, and insist that they push back against Real ID. Support Thomas Massie's push back on Real ID. Let's persuade the Trump administration the foolishness of enforcing Real ID. Sam?
Also, with the centralized digital currency agenda coming our way, which Donald was against before, but now it seems like he's starting to back. If you're not careful, that will then be digital money that will eventually be tied to this, quote, Real ID. And eventually we'll start to get the communist Chinese style, instead of just doing a credit check or a credit score, you're going to have this, social credit score where you're basically saying, Lowell, you went on Liberty Roundtable Live with Sam and we're trashing Real ID. I think we need to, decrease the value of your money or deny you access to your funds or until you decide to take that down and stop that. Pretty soon that we're going to be backing into that, and we will have given them all the pieces to the puzzle through Real ID to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And pretty soon that'll be known as the mark of the beast, right? You can't buy or sell, can't do anything unless you have the mark of the beast. Who knows what that is? I don't know. I'm just conjecturing here, but
yeah. Other than that, it's not so bad on Lowell.
Other than that, it's not so bad, yeah.
All right, we're in a war with the Ukraine, sadly but true. I don't know why we're there, but we are. The road to Ukraine is very interesting, according to Larry Johnson.
Yeah, he writes a great three-piece column, three-part column, I guess, three-part series, describing the history of NATO and U.S. military exercises with Ukraine. All three parts are posted at sonar21.com. The first part is posted at ronpaulinstitute.org, where you can start reading. And I don't intend to cover this series in detail here, Sam, but I thought some of our listeners would be interested in the whole story behind the efforts of the West to entice Russia into a war that was designed to weaken them. This series shows how the West, acting like a camel, slipped its big nose under the Ukrainian tent as part of a long-term strategy to defeat Russia. While many of these exercises were touted as peacekeeping in nature, the real purpose was to train and equip Ukraine with the ultimate goal of fighting and defeating Russia. In July of 1998, for example, NATO's Sea Breeze maritime exercises included anti-submarine warfare. The process of making Ukraine a de facto member of NATO started in 1992, folks. That is over 30 years ago. That was 1 year after the collapse of the Soviet Union. These plans took shape. 1994 marked the first year that Ukrainian forces participated in NATO exercises, although they were held in Poland and in the Netherlands. The following year, 1995, witnessed the creation of Ukraine's Yavoriv military base as the NATO training center, although this was not formalized until 1999. And that was no coincidence. It was the year NATO expanded to the east by accepting the Czech Republic, Hungary, and Poland as new members in March of 1999. Well, this provoked alarm in Russia because it obliterated the promise of former U.S. Secretary of State James Baker that NATO would not move 1 inch to the east. Well, President Bill Clinton broke that promise. And so this part 1 of the series covers the history of this story from 90 to 99, basically a decade at a time. Part 2 covers 2000 to 2010. Part 3 covers 2011 to 21. And so the plan to use Ukraine as a proxy to weaken Russia was born in the 1990s, and that matured into full-blown war in 2022. This long
and Donald said he'd get us out of it virtually first day. He hasn't done any such thing, right?
That's exactly right. So Larry Johnson is the gentleman who wrote these long but informative columns. Who's Larry Johnson? Well, he's a former analyst at the CIA. And I just want to conclude this by reading
highlight,
concluding paragraph from part 1. He says, I spent 23 years scripting military exercises for U.S. Special Forces. This is Larry Johnson talking. He says, while I was not involved in the scripting of any of these NATO U.S. military exercise, I understand the purpose and process of them. These were not harmless games. They were designed to train and equip the Ukrainian military to fight Russia, potentially with NATO's direct involvement. We have seen that come to fruition since the start of the special military operation in 2022. It's no coincidence that Russia hit the Yavoriv NATO military facility on March of 22. End of quote. Sam?
Are we on a fool's errand, ladies and gentlemen? Jonathan Hoffer thinks so, and I do too. He's talking about a fool's errand. Let's talk about it in seconds with Lowell Nelson, campaignforliberty.org, right here on the one and only Liberty Roundtable Live.
How would you like to help this program reach more people and earn silver at the same time? Call or text 801-669-2211 for complete details.
News this hour from townhall.com. I'm Rich Thomason. Peace may return to Ukraine for at least 72 hours next week. Russian President Putin declaring a temporary ceasefire, marking Victory Day in World War II. And President Trump admits to being frustrated with Russian and Ukrainian leaders as he tries to broker a peace deal.
Even though the Kremlin has declared a 72-hour ceasefire in Ukraine next week, President Trump remains unhappy with both Russia and Ukraine.
He is increasingly frustrated with leaders of both countries. He wants to see a permanent ceasefire.
Until now, Russia's Vladimir Putin has refused to accept a complete, unconditional ceasefire. Meanwhile, the Trump administration describes this week as very critical in its efforts to end the war. Greg Clugston, the White House.
The president set to return to a state that he won in 2016 and 2024. Tomorrow, Mr. Trump will hold a campaign-style rally north of Detroit in Macomb County, Michigan. The 30-year-old suspect in a deadly attack in Vancouver is charged with multiple counts of murder. Police say he intentionally rammed his vehicle into a crowd at a street festival in the Canadian city over the weekend. 11 people were killed, many more injured.
In Vancouver, a man drove an SUV into a crowd at a Filipino festival, killing multiple people and injuring scores more Saturday night. Police say they are confident it was not terrorism and have the 30-year-old driver in custody. Video shows a man surrounded by people screaming and swearing at him.
And that's correspondent Julie Walker. The Vatican says the conclave to elect a successor to Pope Francis will get underway on May 7th. Large parts of Spain and Portugal have been hit by a power outage. Utility crews now working to get the lights back on. Watching Wall Street this morning, the Dow trading 130 points higher. The Nasdaq is down 46. More on these stories at townhall.com.
Hi, it's Mike Gallagher. I've been thinking, why does it feel like losing weight is harder than ever before? With mixed messages, fad diets, the quick fix injections, even magic coffee. I mean, it's overwhelming. Most people are exhausted trying to fight a battle they cannot win. If you feel this way, trust me, you're not alone. I used to feel that way too. But let me tell you, it's not your fault. Your body is working against you, and the longer you wait, the harder it gets. Do what I did. I called PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition 3 years ago. I lost 53 pounds. I feel terrific, and I've kept the weight off. Make the phone call that can change your life the way it has changed mine. They won't let you fail. Call 855-696-2020. That's 855-696-2020 to schedule your consultation. The first 11 callers who mentioned the word healthy will get 2 free weeks added to their weight loss package. Call now, 855-696-2020. Mention the keyword healthy to get 2 free weeks, or visit them at myphdweightloss.com, myphdweightloss.com.
You know where the solution can be found, Mr. President? In churches, in wedding chapels, in maternity wards across the country and around the world. More babies will mean forward-looking adults, the sort we need to tackle long-term, large-scale problems. American babies in particular are likely going to be wealthier, better educated, and more conservation-minded than children raised in still industrializing countries. As economist Tyler Cowen recently wrote, quote, by having more children, you're making your nation more populous, thus boosting its capacity to solve climate change. The planet does not need for us to think globally and act locally so much as it needs us to think family and act personally. The solution to so many of our problems, at all times and in all places, is to fall in love, get married, and have some kids.
Looking for an IT partner that truly understands your needs? Managed IT Services is the answer. We meet with you regularly to discuss your goals and form a tailored technology plan. Our customers have called us a trusted advisor who delivers. When it comes to IT, we do it all. Firewalls, cloud storage, server migration, and more. Say goodbye to long-term contracts and hello to a team that earns your business month after month. Call 801-706-6980 now and let Managed IT Services transform your IT experience.
Have you ever had great honey? No, I mean really good, all-natural, raw honey? Well, now you can, thanks to localhoneyman.com. We can ship out our locally made honey all across the U.S. So don't worry, you won't miss out. Plus, Local Honeyman has so many different flavors, like Utah Wildflower, High Desert Delight, Happy Valley, and Blackberry, just to name a few. So purchase your delicious raw honey today at localhoneyman.com.
Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
All right, back with you live, ladies and gentlemen. Sam Bushman, Lowell Nelson on your radio. Hard-hitting talk at your fingertips always. CampaignForLiberty.org, RonPaulInstitute.org, one of the premier organizations making a difference for conservative values in America today. I commend them for their work. We talked about Real ID. The fact is it's phony security, real authoritarianism. Ron Paul writes the article, and he highlights the feds say they're not requiring states to, quote, implement Real ID. However, the citizens in states that don't have Real ID can't go on planes, trains, and can't go into government buildings. So there you go. They're forcing it and pretending they're not is the big lie. Shame on the Donald. Donald's backing Real ID, even though there's no constitutional authority for a Real ID. Look, like most post 9/11 security bills, those Real IDs does nothing to protect the American people, but it does create a liberty crisis. Folks, we got to talk Donald out of Real ID. All right, back to the topic at hand. I mentioned before the break, ladies and gentlemen, that there's a fool's errand going on, and I want to warn you about it. Jonathan Hoffer writes the article. Lowell?
Yes, Sam. Thanks. Great article about the drug war, basically, and he cites the experience of MS-13 gangs. When they first came to America, they were fairly weak, right? When they first came, and so we deported them back to, either in prison or back to their countries. But that actually spread the criminal network. The MS-13 was born in L.A., but it flourished in Central America only after the U.S. shipped its members back to unstable countries with policies that exacerbated gangs. So rather than eliminating MS-13, the problem was exported, and then it boomeranged back even stronger to the United States. And so what Hoffer is saying here, he's right. He's saying that if we deport these gangsters back to El Salvador, then, they're just going to come back. They're going to boomerang back bigger than and stronger than ever before, more vicious than ever before. And he makes a point here, Sam, that longer sentences do not deter crime. People who join gangs, they know full well that death is a possibility, but incarceration can enhance respect and loyalty among gang members as they maintain control from jail. Right? So it's kind of a badge of honor if you're a gangster and you go to jail, right? I mean, that's a badge of honor. They wear it like it's an honorable thing, and they get more power, more control, more prestige, more respect from fellow gang members if that's what happens to them. So incarceration is really not a good answer. People join gangs for a number of reasons. Probably a lot of them because they want this sense of belonging to an organization that they like and they respect, right? Or some of them may join just to feel protected. They protected from other gangs, right? So they join one gang to be protected against another. Well, there's numerous reasons, but gangs thrive and they grow violent through the sale of illicit drugs, right? That's what feeds gangs, is the sale of illegal drugs. And so what Hoffer is writing, he says, quote, to dismantle transnational gangs, our policies must hit them where it truly stings, their wallets, end of quote. Well, that's hard. That's a hard sell among politicians because politicians don't want to admit they're wrong about anything, right? They don't want to admit defeat, and they find it very hard to study or embrace counterintuitive policies. And this, if we were to stop the war on drugs or make legal drugs which heretofore have been illegal, that's counterintuitive, right? And so they don't like to think about that. Plus, they don't like to admit defeat. Well, so Hoffer writes, to fight gangs, he says, quote, the strongest weapon is to legalize drugs to undercut their primary source of revenue. The decriminalization of cannabis in the United States has dealt a blow to Mexican cartels, resulting in lower crime rates and gang activity. People who advocate for drug prohibition often claim the moral high ground. This is understandable, but they are propping up what they claim to oppose in practice. The moralists and the criminal profiteers are on the very same team, as they both want drugs to be illegal. The former claims moral victory, while the latter benefits from governments inadvertently creating lucrative black markets. End of quote. I just think that's such a keen observation, Sam. Counterintuitive, but it's a keen, astute observation. It's kind of similar to car manufacturers who lobby Congress for more regulations. They do that to keep smaller producers out of the marketplace, leaving the spoils to the big automakers, right? And so the bottom line here for Hoffer is to starve the beast, right? Strip the gangs of their profits, and then they will disappear because they have no source of revenue. So what do you think about this approach, Sam?
You kind of don't know what to do because there's so many conflicting thoughts there, Lowell. On one hand, you know, when we say, hey, let's stop the war on drugs, let's make drugs legal, you know, I kind of have a problem with that. I don't want to make all these drugs legal. What I don't want them to be is illegal either, and I don't understand why we have to have kind of both. You know, what we should say is whatever you do in your own basement, we don't care. Your rights end where mine begin. Don't hurt me, don't take my stuff is kind of the mantra. And, you know, we don't care what you do in your basement. At the same time, if you sell drugs and harm the lives of other people, now it is a societal community discussion, and we won't let you do it. And so we need to move the needle on this. I think he's right, but that doesn't mean we're advocating for drugs, people. Let's be very clear and understand that, right? We're just simply telling you that when you have these, you know, deportations, they don't work. When you have these drug cartels where the government gives, you know, A, drug cartel a pass, and B, C, and D, and E have to fight for government protection like A's already got. You know, we just create these problems that we exacerbate and continue to expand the problems in America. And so we're not asking for, in any way, for government to promote drugs. We're not saying that. We're just telling you that the current plans, look, you can see that they've failed. MS-13 used to be nothing, and now all of a sudden it's a big problem in America. Or this other gang, I can't even pronounce the name of it or whatever. Or the drug cartels, you know, they used to be just on the periphery of society. Now they've got military hardware and they're in the mainstream. This is the kind of stuff we're saying, hey, this has got to stop, right? And so I just want people to understand what we're saying and what we're not. We're just telling you to get what, if you want to keep doing what you've always been doing, you're going to get what you've always got. You're going to have no change. And so we've got to change our tactics. And even though it sounds contrary to what we really want, the truth is, hey, there's better ways to accomplish our goals, Lowell, and that's really his point, right?
Yeah, absolutely right, Sam. And I think his use of the example of cannabis is instructive here. I mean, we actually had a gang, and we made marijuana illegal. The gang grew to be very explosive, very big, very violent. Then we made cannabis legal, or the states did. The DEA still has not done that, but the states have legalized the use of cannabis in at least 31 states that I know of. Might be up to 34 by now. And then the MS-13 gang problem basically virtually disappeared, right? I mean, they started dealing in other things, but as far as the dealing of cannabis, that's not the big problem that it was. And so using that as an instructive example, we really ought to legalize drugs, not because we want drugs. We hate them. We don't want them. It's just like we're talking about food. You know, if we eat foodless foods, we won't be healthy. And if we do drugs, we're going to be worse off still. So we don't do drugs, but we need to make them legal so that we undermine the profits of these big international, these transnational gangs that are getting rich and more violent because there is revenue for these illegal drugs. So, yeah, I agree, Sam. You know, 20 years ago, I had a talk with Richard Mack. I don't know what his position on this currently is, but I did ask him about the drug war. And at the time, I was visiting with him, 15, 20, 25 years ago. You know, he worked undercover, and his solution to the drug war was to legalize drugs. So take that for what it's worth.
His position is still the same.
Yeah.
And I don't disagree. My only reason to bring up that legal-illegal thing is when we say we want to legalize drugs, people think we're for drugs or for the use of drugs or we're for passing out needles or we're for this and we're for that. We're not any of those things. We're just telling you that this lockdown, illegal black market drug deal only promotes the gangs and the cartels. And then we find out that our government's involved with certain gangs and cartels. And then you go, wait a minute, this isn't working. And so we're not promoting drugs. We're merely saying, hey, stop the war on drugs. We also don't believe in the war versus peace idea in real wars. Hey, we can't go to war in the name of peace. Okay, you can't go on this drug war and partner with cartels in the name of stopping drugs. That's what we're saying.
Yeah, and another problem is that the government likes the drug war. They like to wage the drug war because it gives them an excuse for existence. Gives them an excuse.
Continue.
And a reason to have guns, right? Because they need to fight the drug war. We need to stop these criminals, right? And so it fosters the police state is what it does. And so that's why another reason why government likes it. They don't want to get rid of the war on drugs, else what are they going to use their weapons for, right? I mean, they need a reason for their existence. And so they create these problems and they perpetuate these problems to justify their existence and their use of force and their creation of the police state. So it's insidious, Sam, but the drug war is right. It's part of the government's plan to take over and make a police state out of our country, Sam.
Yes, and the other problem with the war on drugs is this idea, too, that because you are using drugs or addicted, then somehow you're a bad, evil, criminal presence. And I don't accept that. Remember, my rights end where yours begin. And the mantra of the redneck 10 Commandments kind of an idea is, hey, man, don't hurt me, don't take my stuff, okay? Just leave me alone. And that's what we need to have a lot more attitude of. I'm not supporting somebody that's addicted or somebody that's a drug user. All I'm saying is that, hey, they got that way really in partnership with the government in a lot of ways. And so I think what we need to do is just take away the stigma, take away the criminal element, how many people are in jail because they did some drugs or whatever. Take away the dealers because, hey, now you can get these things easily. There's no black market or deal. There's not this whole underground, guns and money and drugs all go together. Okay, you take away the money and pretty soon you don't need the guns and pretty soon. And so you de-escalate this thing. And the best way to de-escalate it is not call everybody that might have made a mistake and become an addicted. We've also fueled that by, hey, we give people drugs in these pharmacies, and then the doctor gave me the drug in the first place, but now the doctor's taking away the drug, and I'm addicted, so I'm going to go get it elsewhere mentality. Hey, we've fueled that and created this crisis. So the best way to back away from the crisis is with kind treatment centers, with getting rid of the guns and the money and the other related illegal activities that relate thereto. We don't want to promote drugs. We don't want to pass out needles, and we don't want taxpayers to be funding this. But we can de-escalate. Most of these people in prison on drug charges shouldn't be there. Many of them are not violent. The ones that end up being violent, usually it's because of the selling and the trade relating to drugs rather than using them. And so we need to be really, really careful. And we're not promoting drugs. We're just telling you that the war on drugs is a fraud. Just like the war that we're experiencing as we escalate in the Ukraine, right?
Yep, that's exactly right, Sam. Couldn't agree more with you on that, for sure.
And Richard still feels basically the same way about this. He feels like the war on drugs is a fraud. It's a farce, and I couldn't agree with him more. He's right.
Yeah.
The question is, how legal do we make them? In other words, how much do we partner with and promote? And that's kind of where I draw the line. Lowell, I don't want to start, promoting needle programs, and I don't want to fund the other side of it. I don't want the pendulum to swing that far. I want the pendulum to swing far enough to say, hey, let's stop the criminal enterprise surrounding all this. But that doesn't mean we have to weigh in on and fund and some of the other side of the equation, making, the reason that alcohol is so prolific is because we promoted it in society. I mean, after all, the government sells it to you and takes a big cut of it. Same thing with cigarettes. And hey, why do these things have to be promoted and legal in a government sense? Just say, hey, you get caught dealing drugs, you're going to prison because you're harming the lives of others in the community. You're using drugs. As long as you're not harming people, leave them alone. We're not going to fund it or anything else for you. But at the same time, hey, we're not going to turn it into an enterprise that somehow continues to use guns and drugs to gain cash to continue to fuel the cycle over and over and over again. Take that all away. But you know what? Speaking of real wars, Jacob Hornberger speaks out about abusing people, and we're abusing people that use drugs, and we're also abusing the Cubans, Lowell.
I love this article. We had some friends that went to Cuba a couple of years ago during that hiatus when they allowed travelers to go down there. They went to Havana. They spent a week down there. They said they had a great time. But then the story I get from Gabriella Puckett, who lived her whole life there until age 18, is a very, very different story. And so, anyway, Hornberger writes this nice column. I'm just going to, we're not going to talk about everything he writes there, but basically the U.S. government has imposed a cruel and brutal economic embargo against Cuba for more than 60 years. It's an embargo. It's designed to inflict maximum economic harm on the Cuban people with the intent of impoverishing them and even killing them through starvation. Right? I mean, that's what he wrote, and it's really true. I mean, why did we impose the embargo? Well, it was to induce a regime change. We were hoping that the people would be so upset with their leadership that they would have a regime change. But folks, the people in Cuba, they don't have the firepower to actually change their regime. They don't have the they don't have the weapons, they don't have the manpower. There's just no way that's going to happen. And so what we're doing with this continued embargo is we're starving them to death. And you know, and Gabriela Puckett, she came to a Highland meeting a few months ago and described life in Cuba. She lived there with her family until she was 18 years old, when the family was able to leave and go to Spain. And from Spain they came to the United States. That was about 6 years ago. And so her recollection of life in Cuba was still very fresh in her mind. What she described was horrific. I mean, empty store shelves. People got a ration of food every day, a little bit of rice, a little bit of oil, and a little bit of bread, moldy bread. I mean, and they had no toilet paper. I mean, it was incredible, horrific conditions of the people growing up in Cuba.
Just imagine if we led with love, Lowell, and we simply said, hey, you know what, we don't really like what your government's doing, but we'll trade with you. People can visit you. The more we expose how real life works in free markets, how real life works in a liberty-based society, not a control-based mechanism, the more the Cubans see that, the more they will push for that internally, and the more they will advocate for that, and the more they will. And so we don't need to, again, help the communist Chinese or the Russians or the whoever, North Koreans or whoever wants to use Cuba as an outpost. We got to lead with kill them with kindness, win them over by our example and by integrating them into our lives in ways that make it almost impossible to lock the people down. That's what we should be doing. What we've done is just the opposite, from trying to kill dictators in Cuba to modern day. Everything we've done, in my opinion, just throw these countries into the arms of our enemies, Lowell.
Yeah, it reminds me of what Joseph Smith said. The surest way to defeat your enemy is to make him your friend. And we can do that best of all by giving them the example and by trading with them and helping them be wealthy. Because that's what happens in trade. You know, we trade, you know, we might buy their sugar cane from Cuba, and we sell them, you know, our rocking chairs or whatever. But that is a mutually beneficial win-win situation when you have trade, you have commerce, and you make friends. You realize that the people are great. See, it's really the dictators, the political class in most of the countries around the world that create all these problems. The people are beautiful, kind people. Yeah, I mean, look at the China.
Representative John J. Duncan literally lays out the same point, different venue, Lowell.
That's right. He's talking about Israel killing people in Gaza. Reuters reports that food is running out since Israel imposed a total blockade of food, water, and medicine on Gaza following the end of the ceasefire 6 weeks ago. Using starvation as a weapon of war is a war crime, folks. This really makes Benjamin Netanyahu, who I call Netanyahu, a war criminal. That's what he is. And anybody who supports Netanyahu is a war criminal, right? I mean, on April 4th, right, this is just 3 weeks ago, 4.5 weeks ago, 1,000 current and former Israeli Air Force reservists signed a letter demanding an end to the war in Gaza. And so along with the bad news comes the good news, right? There's people in our military of the IDF, right, the Israeli Defense Force. There's actual people now over in the military in Israel saying, we got to stop this. The letter that they put together says, quote, the continuation of the war does not advance any of the declared goals of war and will bring about the deaths of the hostages, IDF Army soldiers, and innocent civilians, end of quote. So basically, we got a lot of military people over in Israel calling on Netanyahu to end the war, to stop the war, stop the killing. Because, I mean, there was another article I read, Sam. It's just horrific what's happening to the people in Gaza. I mean, I couldn't even mention on air some of the horrendous things going on to the people, and a lot of them have left Gaza. It's a war-torn land. Everything's been destroyed. They're starving. They're dying, and it's a genocide, Sam. It's a modern-day genocide.
No question. Let me explain my humble view of what the problem is. You know, because Israel's there, landlocked by everybody else, and everybody else wants to wipe them off the face of the map, that's what we're told, then we believe that we got to defend Israel under any circumstances. And the problem is that Israel has gone from a defensive position to an offensive position. And they want to expand. They don't want to just defend themselves and stop the carnage and stop from being wiped off the face of the earth. They take that as a carte blanche to expand their agenda. Whenever governments go from the defensive to the offensive, it goes south and doesn't go well, folks. I don't care the situation. Whenever government literally goes on the offensive beyond the defensive nature, government turns into the problem, not the solution. War on drugs, war on Israel, war on Cuba. Everywhere you look, it's the same. Why is Israel killing ambulance workers, starving little children and everything else? Because we, the people in the United States, with our own tax dollars, are funding their offensive position. It must stop. Final topic of the hour, why are vaccines causing autism? LouRockwell.com with a great article, Lowell.
Yeah, halfway down this article, which you can find on Substack as well. In fact, let me just give that out first. I want people to know KirschSubstack.com is a place to go to read articles by Steve Kirsch. His last name is KirschSch. So KirschSubstack.com to read this article in detail. But the four highlights that I want to hit here, the issues halfway down the article. Number one, while many parents have observed their healthy children suddenly regress and become severely impaired immediately after a vaccine, to my knowledge, he says, there are no reported cases of rapid autistic regressions happening immediately prior to vaccination. Yeah, so that's piece of evidence. Number two, over the past 50 years, there's been an exponential increase in the rates of autism. And so, folks, this is startling here. It went from 1 in 10,000 children 50 years ago to now 1 in 31. That is super
and actually
dramatic
it's 1
increase.
in 12 in California.
Holy cow. This rapid increase suggests something is causing it, and more importantly, that is absolutely urgent for us to figure out what this something is. Well, it's the vaccines, folks. Let me just cut to the chase. That's on that. And number three, the most common explanation given for the explosion in autism is that it's genetic. Well, that can't be, because there's no way it would become such a big issue, 100 times more common in just 1 or 2 generations. The last reason, number four, while many studies are published debunking the link between vaccines and autism, they never directly assess the question. Independent studies continually find indisputable links between the two. And so basically, vaccines are causing the autism, folks. And if you read KirschSubstack.com, he'll give you more reasons than you can shake a stick at. We need to stop giving vaccines to our babies. They don't have an immune system at that age, and they get their immunity from their mother's milk. Sam?
And it starts with not protecting the vaccine companies from accountability and liability when things go wrong. If they had accountability and liability, we could turn this around very quickly. But when the government provides special privileged protection, look out, people, because the people will suffer. And you see the writing on the wall. Thanks for being along. Lowell Nelson, CampaignForLiberty.org, an award-winning, solutions-oriented organization that you need to partner with today. That's right. Partner with them today. Lowell Nelson doing a great, great job. CampaignForLiberty.org. This broadcast is syndicated by the Loving Liberty Radio Network. Check it out at lovingliberty.net.